Believe they've discovered the body of this man, entertainer Walter Scott, ending a 3.5-year-old mystery. Good evening, I'm Dick Ford. An Eyewitness News crew was the only crew on the scene when the discovery was made. Channel 5's DEANNE Lane is there now and has a live report for us. DeAnne?
Dick, the body of entertainer Walter Scott is believed to be in a cistern behind this home in the 5600 block of Gudermuth in St. Charles County. The house is owned by a Jim Williams, who ironically is now married to Scott's ex-wife. Mrs. Williams died in a tragic auto accident in 1983. Officers who have been haunted by this case say their big break came last night. And joining me live right now is the Sheriff of St. Charles County, Ed Ubinger. Thank you very much for joining us. What led you to the body?
Well, we have been investigating it for the past 5 months. We reopened the investigation. Of course, we have been investigating it all along. The case started to break late last night. We received a search warrant this afternoon, and we executed the search warrant at approximately 7 o'clock this evening.
Can you get into what broke the case last night?
No, I have really no comment on that.
A lot of residents right now concerned. How do you know that this is Walter Scott? What leads you to believe that it is indeed him after all this time?
Well, the clothing description that was given by relatives matches, and obviously we have to do some other things, but we believe it is Walter Scott.
What can you tell us about the man in custody?
I can't tell you anything. We have a white male, age 48, in custody.
Is it Big Jim Williams, the man who owns this home and is also married to Scott's ex-wife?
I have no comment on that.
What about the former Joanne Scott, who is now Joanne Williams? Is she a suspect in the case?
I have no comment on that.
But you do expect further arrests in this case?
Possibly.
Tonight?
Possibly.
Are you treating this, in light of all the circumstances surrounding it, the tragic auto accident with Mr. Williams' wife, are you treating this as a double homicide?
I can say that 2 weeks ago we exhumed the body of Sharon Williams, who was allegedly killed in an automobile accident on October 19th, 1983. That exhumation resulted in an autopsy being performed in which the St. Charles County Medical Examiner, Dr. Mary Case, has ruled it a homicide.
Is the man who is in custody, you believe, responsible for both deaths?
I have no comment on that.
Okay, this obviously has been a long road for you, a long nightmare for a lot of your men. How are you feeling tonight?
We feel pretty good about the case. We've done a lot of work. We've put in a lot of hours. We've handled it very carefully, and we feel pretty good about it.
Sheriff, thank you very much for joining us. Earlier this evening, I spoke with residents in the neighborhood who tonight are expressing shock.
Kind of makes me uneasy. I really don't know much what has happened, but it's still unsettling.
What do you think about this happening in your neighborhood?
Well, it just happens. I guess it could happen anywhere.
And as we mentioned, what is believed to be the body of entertainer Walter Scott is in a cistern behind this home. The medical examiner is on the scene. They have not yet moved the body. They're trying to get it. And of course, we'll continue to follow this story for you. Reporting live from St. Charles County, DEANNE Lane, Channel 5, Eyewitness News. Dick?
Thank you, DeAnne, very much for that fine report. The Scott disappearance, of course, made headlines back in 1983 and 84. Walter Scott was a popular entertainer and had his own band and nightclub revue. Scott gained early fame originally with Bobby Cuban and his orchestra in the 1960s. Scott's real name was Walter Simon Nothies, Jr. He was 40 years old when he disappeared the night of December 27, 1983. Scott left his home near St. Peter's to get his car repaired. The next day, his 1979 Lincoln was found at Lambert St. Louis Airport. Right from the start, St. Charles County investigators suspected foul play.
He had an engagement in Pennsylvania. And Walter Scott, from what we've been able to determine, would never miss an engagement. When he left the house, he left in jogging clothes, didn't take a wallet, credit cards or anything.
8 months after Scott's disappearance, his wife of 14 years filed for divorce. She accused her absent husband of adultery, among other things. Joanne Marie Nothies was given custody of the couple's children. Throughout the long investigation into Scott's disappearance, she declined to take a lie detector test. There are, of course, a lot of loose ends remaining on this story, and we'll have more on the Eyewitness News tomorrow and follow this story, of course, as it develops. Well, there's another new development in the Walter Scott story. Let's go back to DeAnne Lane live in St. Charles County. DeAnne?
That's right, Dick. The body of what's believed to be Walter Scott has now been retrieved from a cistern behind this home. The home is owned by Jim Williams, ironically married to Scott's ex-wife. Williams' wife also died in 1983 in a tragic auto accident. This case, we are told, is now being handled as a double homicide. Sheriff Ubinger also told me just moments ago deputies are now on their way to make a second arrest in connection with this case. We'll continue to follow it for you. Have a complete report tomorrow on Eyewitness News. Reporting live from St. Charles County, DEANNE Lane, Channel 5, Eyewitness News.
Okay, thank you, DeAnne, very much. Well,
Station.
Good evening. The body of a St. Louis entertainer who's been missing for nearly 4 years was found tonight in St. Charles County.
Police have another man in custody in connection with the murder. Tonight, reporter Rocky Madden is at the scene.
Karen, we're at the home said to be owned by Mr. Jim Williams. Behind me, authorities are in the backyard searching through a cistern where they believe they have found the body of former St. Louis entertainer Walter Scott. Scott disappeared in December of 1983. Scott's widow, Joanne, then married Jim Williams. Williams' former wife, Sharon, had died just months before Scott had disappeared. Moments ago, we talked to Sheriff Ed Eubinger.
And we reopened this investigation approximately 5 months ago. We have been working on it a tremendous amount of hours. Information began developing within the past few days. We began getting more and more information. Basically, the case broke open last night and early today, and we just continued our efforts.
Now, I told you that Williams' wife, Sharon, had died just months before Scott disappeared. 2 weeks ago, authorities exhumed the body of Sharon Williams, and they have now determined that her death was a homicide. They have arrested one man tonight, a 48-year-old white male. He is in jail. They have not charged him. They will be going for warrants tomorrow, and they have not released his name. Karen, Lloyd?
Rocky, how were they able to identify the body so quickly?
Well, they haven't for sure, they are not for sure saying that it is the former entertainer. Of course, at this point, though, they say that the body is wearing the same clothes that Mr. Scott was last seen in. Of course, they will have to do an autopsy, determine how the subject died, use dental records to determine if it really is him, but they're pretty sure tonight.
What do neighbors say about the Williams home, Rocky?
Well, when Mr. Williams was married to his former wife, they said they heard a lot of arguments over here, a lot of bickering, and not very friendly attitude over on this side of the yard.
All right, thanks a lot, Rocky. At this hour, hundreds of
Formally charged today in St. Charles County Court. 48-year-old Jim Williams is charged with killing his first wife, Sharon, and Walter Scott. Joanne Williams, Scott's former wife, is also charged with killing Scott. The local entertainer disappeared December 27, 1983. Friday night, Scott's body was discovered in a cistern behind a St. Charles County home owned by Jim Williams. Pat McGee has known Williams for almost 20 years.
He was really nice. I mean, you know, he's helped us. He's helped my dad a lot. We used to go swimming all the time in their pool. We grew up with their kids. And I still can't believe this is happening.
Jim Williams is being held without bond. Joanne Williams' bond was set at $500,000.
A Washington musician Walter Scott appeared in court today. Scott's former wife, Joanne Williams, and her new husband, James Williams, arraigned today on first-degree murder charges. They are accused of conspiring in the shooting death of Scott. His remains were found Friday in a cistern at the Williams home. He had been missing since 1983. Now, prosecutors admit their case will be complicated since it's based on circumstantial evidence.
Circumstantial cases are always somewhat involved. You have to put on a lot of witnesses. You have to overcome kind of a natural reluctance sometime of juries to convict on circumstantial evidence. But we think the evidence is strong, and this will be a good case.
James Williams is being held without bond. His wife, Joanne, is being held on $500,000 bond. Tonight,
Scott disappeared in December of 1983. His body found Friday night in an unused cistern behind a home in St. Charles County owned by James Williams.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Police are comparing it to the script from a made-for-TV movie, an apparent variation of a lover's triangle that has left 2 people dead.
And a St. Charles couple charged with the murder. The case involves 2 local couples. First, St. Louis singer Walter Scott and his wife Joanne. Second, Jimmy Williams and his deceased wife Sharon, who reportedly died in a car accident back in October of 1983. Now, Walter Scott was reported missing 2 months ago, and about a year ago, Jimmy Williams and Joanne Scott married each other. Well, tonight, authorities claim that Mr. Williams and Mrs. Scott murdered their respective spouses so they could be together. Walter Scott's body was recovered last night from a cistern behind a St. Charles County home owned by Jimmy Williams. Authorities believe Scott was murdered and dumped in the cistern shortly after his disappearance.
Has been positively, or should I say scientifically identified. He was shot in the left shoulder. His death was a projectile severed a major artery.
A fresh investigation into Sharon Williams' death reveals that she too had been murdered and that the car wreck had been used as a cover-up. Late this afternoon, Jimmy Williams was charged with murder in connection with both deaths.
The recovery of Walter Scott's body does more than end a 3.5-year-old mystery. It brings sad relief to the family and friends of the murdered singer.
Mainly for his parents, because they have suffered through this thing. I've spent just hours on the phone with them and been over their house. In fact, we were just over there this past weekend and had dinner. And, you know, obviously the subject comes up and they don't know, I don't know, nobody knows, seems to know. And the fact that they now know, I'm sure it's going to be a lot easier on them because they just never had any idea whether he was ever going to come walking in that door again.
Yes, there's some sense of relief now. We at least know where he's at now, you know, even though it is bad, but we figured it all the time that he wouldn't be coming back anyway.
I knew he was in St. Charles. I had said all along that's where he was. He would not go any further.
Scott, whose real name was Walter Notice Jr., was trying to make a go of it as a solo act when he disappeared. But he dreamed of rekindling the chemistry that produced the top 10 hit The Cheater in 1966. That's when British artists like the Beatles and Stones hogged the charts.
Look out for the cheater. Make way for the full-hearted clown.
He wanted to do this again. He says now with music videos and everything like that, we could get the old band back together because we were doing stuff back in those days that music videos, we make them look ridiculous today.
I just hope that justice is done. That's whoever's involved in it, whoever's responsible for it, I hope they get whatever's coming to them.
He was a very quiet person off stage, but on stage he was very vivacious and he loved to entertain.
Scott did leave a legacy of songs, an unpublished album held up by his disappearance.
It was made in Pennsylvania, and this fellow made it, and we were there 3 years ago, and he played it for us, and he said as soon as we find out what happened to him, then we can cut it, and we'll put it on the market.
Who used to build you up just to let you down?
Walter Scott's last album should be released
In St. Charles County today, covering the Walter Scott murder story. She has more now.
James and Joanne Williams have lived in this quiet Park Charles subdivision in St. Charles County for a little more than a year now. And police say all the time they were living with a terrible secret. The secret, their spouses murdered. Walter Scott was a well-known local entertainer who used to sing with the Bob Cuban Band. He disappeared on December 27, 1983. A couple of months earlier, in October of 1983, the body of Sharon Williams was found at the bottom of a hill in St. Charles County. Until a few weeks ago, police believed her death was an accident, but a more recent autopsy reveals she was murdered. Scott's ex-wife Joanne and Williams's ex-husband James are now married to each other. Authorities are speculating they plotted to kill their spouses so they could be together. The body of Walter Scott was found in the backyard of the house where James and Sharon Williams used to live. It's quiet here today, where last night police found the body in this cistern. Now it's covered with this planter box. And the people in this quiet neighborhood are finding all of this a little hard to believe.
I'm sure the neighborhood's pretty shocked over the whole thing. Most of them in the neighborhood knew Jim. It's just kind of depressing, you know, to think that something like this can happen in your neighborhood.
Things were also quiet in the neighborhood where James and Joanne Williams began their new lives together. Their neighbors didn't have much to say, except that they think neither James nor Joanne Williams is guilty of anything. Linda Laurel, News 4, St. Charles.
Homicides occurred almost 3.5 years ago. It was originally believed Mrs. Williams died in a car accident, but new evidence reveals that's not the case. The other person believed involved in the double killing is Joanne Scott Williams, the current wife of James Williams, the ex-wife of Walter Scott. She's expected to turn herself in tonight here in St. Charles County. Reporting live from St. Charles, Rich Isom, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
Good evening. St. Charles police have issued a second arrest warrant in connection with last night's discovery of Walter Scott's body. Scott's ex-wife, Joanne Marie Williams, is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree for the death of her former husband. His body was found in a cistern in the yard behind the house where Williams and her second husband used to live.
We have scientifically identified the body that was in the cistern to be Walter Scott. He died as a result of a gunshot wound to his back. Apparently it severed an artery, and as a result he died.
News 4's Linda Laurel will have more on the story later in this broadcast. Department.
Haven't you heard about the guy known as a cheater?
This is the song Walter Scott made famous. It's a rock and roll classic from the middle 60s when Scott sang the lead for the St. Louis group Bob Cuban and the NENS. Cuban says Scott, years after going solo, still loved that song.
When that thing hit, there was so much happening at that time. We were doing a little bit of traveling, and of course promoting the record, and we're getting play here, and we were getting, we did the American Bandstand show and everything like that. It was just, it was a great thing. And he was talking, you know, he wanted to do this again.
On stage he was vivacious, but off stage he was quiet. He was a very quiet person off stage, but on stage he was very vivacious, and he loved to entertain.
Scott's parents, Kay and Walter Notice, for the past 3.5 years have had only their son's memories and his music.
All of you girls had better stay inside your door now.
This is a very difficult time for the Notices. Funeral arrangements and then most likely a trial is in their future, but they say they're ready.
I just hope that justice is done. That's whoever's involved in it, whoever's responsible for it, I hope they get whatever's coming to them.
Now that the mystery of the disappearance of Walter Scott is finally solved, the Notices say they can at least look forward to the release of his last recordings.
It's made in Pennsylvania, and this fella made it, and we were there 3 years ago, and he played it for us, and he said as soon as we find out what happened to him, then we can cut it, and we'll put it on the market.
Who used to build you up just to let you down?
Scott's last album will probably be released sometime this fall.
The body of St. Louis entertainer Walter Scott is found after 3 years, and authorities say his ex-wife will face murder charges. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Edlin. Scott's body was found in cistern yesterday and is thought to be part of a double murder. 48-year-old James Williams has been charged with Scott's death and that of his own wife. Channel 5's Rich Isom is standing by live now in St. Charles County. Rich?
Rick, the charges came down late this afternoon. Authorities say they stem from 2 killings done for love and insurance money. Behind bars is 48-year-old James Williams, an electrical contractor here in St. Charles County. Williams is charged with killing his former wife, Sharon Williams, and Walter Scott, the husband of his current wife. Both homicides occurred almost 3.5 years ago. It was originally believed Mrs. Williams died in a car accident, but new evidence reveals that's not the case.
We spent the last 5 months attempting to gain the exhumation of Sharon Williams. Within the last 2 weeks we were able to do that. That particular case resulted in an autopsy in which the medical examiner ruled that it was a homicide. So basically, after that information, some more information developed. That led to a search warrant at the residence on Gudermuth Road, and which led us to the body of Walter Scott.
What is the status of Mr. Scott's wife at this point?
I have no comment on it.
Is she a suspect in this at all?
We will make other arrests sometime today.
The other person believed involved in the double killing is Joanne Scott Williams, the current wife of James Williams, the ex-wife of Walter Scott. Missing for 3.5 years, Scott's body was found yesterday in the cistern at his St. Charles home.
3 years had passed. Had you pretty much given up all hope that the cause would ever have been found?
No, I figured we'd always, someday or another, we'd find out what happened to him. We suspected that something really did happen to him, and he didn't really go off like some people expected, you know, or some people thought he did.
Now, Joanne Scott Williams is expected to give herself up here in St. Charles tonight. She and James Williams have been married for just about a year. As for insurance money, James Williams apparently collected more than $100,000 after his wife died in what appeared to be a 1983 car crash. We'll, of course, have more on this story later on. Now reporting live from St. Charles County, Rich Isom, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Rich, thank you very much for that report.